Donal MacIntyre, investigative journalist best known for his fearless work confronting dangerous criminal organisations, is on a mission to uncover the modern face of international crime. Travelling with him to some of the world's best-known cities, we'll meet members of the criminal underworld, police and local residents to discover what life is really like in the world's toughest times. We're in Istanbul, a beautiful city with a dark secret.
With the barrel.
Where billions of dollars of drug money is funding terrorism.
There was just nothing there. You couldn't believe that anybody or anything could have survived.
English, no problem, I can't see.
Donal's in Istanbul to uncover the secrets of the heroin trade. Istanbul is a city that bridges two continents and two cultures. Its geographical placement makes it an obvious doorway to the mystical East. It also has a growing reputation as the world's newest party destination. But Donal's here to uncover the darker secrets lurking beneath the city's friendly facade. Istanbul is at the geographical heart of the heroin trade. Its unique location enables Turkish gangs to act as a conduit for the drug. From the poppy fields in Afghanistan to the streets of major European cities. A trade that has links with football hooliganism and suicide bombings. Donal is here to find out why the famous gateway to the east has become a major drugs corridor to the west. He's also going to uncover the link between drugs and international terrorism. Istanbul is one of Turkey's largest cities, home to over 12 million people. East and west are separated by the Bosphorus, the strait that connects the Black Sea to the Sea of Marmara and literally splits the city in two. But it's not just the Bosphorus that splits Istanbul in two. There is an intense football rivalry in the city, and extreme groups on either side act as breeding grounds for Istanbul's criminal underworld. Donal is meeting with Okan Altıparmak, a renowned Turkish football historian and Istanbul resident. Okan's a passionate fan of Fenerbahce. At a recent Fenerbahce-Galatasaray game, Okan and his friend experienced firsthand the violent lengths some fans are prepared to go to in the name of their team.
We came out of a match, he was a Fenerbahce fan. We were walking out and he was telling me how much he hates Galatasaray fans. And in front of us there were some young Fenerbahce fans walking. And one of them turns around and says, "Hey, I'm a Galatasaray fan." And the guy says, "Well, I'm not talking about you, I'm talking to my friends. Just turn around and leave." And then they got into a fight. We did not see a knife or anything. We pulled our friend, we went and we started drinking beers. 45 minutes later, a friend of ours came. And he goes, "Man, you're bleeding." As it turns out, the guy was stabbed 7 times.
Knife crime is a problem in Istanbul, and this kind of attack is not uncommon.
80% of the Turkish public is living below the poverty line. Young people carry knives around because it's the easily available weapon, and people are so prone to violence in Istanbul. So let's say the low classes, they have a tendency to carry a lot of knives.
The combination of knife crime, organised violence and poverty lead Donal to suspect that there might be more to hooliganism than just passion for a football team. Following his instincts, Donal meets with Gareth Jenkins, a journalist who's lived in Istanbul for 20 years. He's written about Istanbul's football hooligans and has an insight into how they operate.
But in Turkey, for the groups, really it's their whole life. They start off when they're very young. When they get into their early teens, they are allowed to effectively run with the group. Once they've proved themselves, and proving themselves means not just able to fight, being able to respond to orders, being able to apply tactics, then they're given a knife. In order to become a fully paid up member of the group, they have to perform what's called a bursa, which involves plunging a knife, the blade of which is about 30 centimeters long, into the buttocks of a member of the opposing group. They plunge in the knife and twist it and then pull out the knife. When they've done that, then they become a fully paid up member.
This is more than just fighting for the honour of your team. Based on an established hierarchy, these groups are a proving ground for those who are willing to kill.
When honour is involved, there are two ways that they execute a member of an opposing group. Is a knife straight through the heart or into the back and slashing across the back to destroy the liver. All of the hardcore groups in Turkey are associated with the Turkish underworld. In many cases, or in nearly all cases, their day job really is working for the members of the Turkish mafia, collecting protection money, fencing stolen goods. Some of them are doing a little bit involved in the narcotics trade. It's part of the whole structure of the way organised crime works. When people are no longer young enough and strong enough to be a football hooliganism, they can kind of move up the chain of command and get into other forms of organised crime.
It's clear that in Istanbul, football hooliganism is connected to other more serious criminal activity. This is how organised crime in Istanbul recruits its members. And as with most organised crime, drugs are never far from the picture. Because of its location, Istanbul is one of the world's biggest transit hubs for heroin. The drugs that pass through the city have arrived fresh from the mountains of Afghanistan. But drugs aren't the only thing passing through Istanbul. Islamic extremism is making its mark on the city too. We're with Donal MacIntyre in Istanbul, a remarkable and unique city, but one which is used by gangs to traffic heroin. But these gangs don't just control the cross-border heroin trade. They are also involved in supplying the estimated 4 million drug users across Turkey. The mafia in Istanbul have long had an influence on the nightclub scene in and around Taksim Square, dealing their drugs and scamming unsuspecting visitors attracted by the bright lights and beautiful ladies.
In the 80s, people were afraid to come down here. It was basically gangsters and these clubs that would rip you off. It was strictly tourist traps. You know, sit down with a Russian girl, have one drink, and get a $5,000 bill, pay up, or get stabbed.
Mafia-sponsored dealers offer protection to the club owners and in return get to sell to the thousands of young people who flock here for a good night out.
You do have to worry about mafia and protection rackets, and I won't name his name, but I just spoke with the club owner about this. I said, what do you do about that? He said, what we do is we corner one drug dealer and we make him the club drug dealer. You'll see most of the good clubs have quite a few bouncers. And you need somebody, one of the managers needs to have some kind of dialogue with the mafia, unfortunately, to keep them at bay.
Like many of Europe's major cities, organised crime has made itself a home here. Away from the popular tourist destinations, some of Istanbul's outer suburbs are definitely not for the faint-hearted.
2/3 of Istanbul actually live in shantytown areas. There are some very, very dangerous neighborhoods. They are not in the guidebooks, they are not in the paper. There are two places which are called Dolapdere and Tarlabaşı. There's lots of drug dealing going on in Dolapdere and Tarlabaşı area. Also, there are gangs of petty crimes like theft, pickpocketing, and they live as families in that neighborhood. It can be dangerous. I've never been there myself in the evening. Actually, personally, I've been there only twice. And I'm not going to say I was shivering, I was so scared, but you could see that there's threat there. It's a very dangerous part of the town.
But instead of relying on hearsay, Donal decides to find out the truth about Istanbul's main streets for himself. He's meeting someone who lives in one of its tougher neighbourhoods. Leaving the relative safety of the city, he travels out to one of the more notorious suburbs.
We have come across one character. Don't know quite what he's going to say, but he's promised to tell us how this city runs and who's running it.
We were told that the man Donal is meeting was involved in one of Istanbul's hooligan gangs, and after hearing about their reputation, Donal's anxious to get the meeting over and done with. The contact arrives late, but reacts nervously to the camera. Donal has to handle him carefully to get what he has come for.
Just how big a presence are the mafia and the criminal entities in Istanbul?
Var yani her şey mafyanın elinde sonuçta. Ne bileyim yani gece kulübü işletenlerin şeyine kadar publar şeyler ellerinde yani insanların. Bu bir gerçek.
How much drugs come through Istanbul on the way to the west?
Olsun buradan yapıldığı söyleniyor. Paraların nereye gittiği belli. Kimlerin bundan işte çıkar sağladığı belli. Bir tek uyuşturucu kaçakçılığı da değil bu iş. Yani bunun arkasında silah kaçakçılığı da var.
Some people must be making millions and millions of euros and dollars from the drug trade, and they must be building big houses and having big yachts. Is Istanbul one of those places which benefits from the profits of drugs?
Bazı şeyler var. Yani bir tabu olmuş. Onun dışına çıkamıyorsun. Kısa sürede baktığın zaman bazı şirketler var birdenbire yükseliyorlar. Dediğin gibi milyon dolarlar kazanıyorlar. Ve paranın nereden geldiği belli değil.
It's obvious that organised crime is deeply enmeshed in the fabric of Istanbul. But this contact won't go into more detail. Donal's determined to get to the bottom of how Istanbul has become exploited by criminal gangs.
Well, the ancient call to prayer has been heard on these streets for centuries. These streets have also been part of the great ancient Silk Route, a route that transported spices and textiles from the Far East and the Orient on the way to the West. Now the route's the same, but the goods are very different. International terrorism and drugs.
Istanbul is the only city in the world to lie across two continents. Formerly known as Constantinople, it was the capital of the Ottoman Empire, an empire that ruled over much of the Middle East, North Africa and Eastern Europe. It was one of the major trading posts along the Silk Road, the old trading route from the Far East to Europe. At the end of the First World War, the mighty Ottoman Empire was finally defeated, and in 1923, under the leadership of Mustafa Kemal Atatürk, the modern Turkish Republic was born. The new republic bridged the continents of Europe and Asia, having Greece and Bulgaria to the west and Iran and Iraq to the east. Its mountainous eastern borders are very hard to police, which makes the area very popular with drug smugglers.
What is the history of Istanbul's involvement in the drug trade?
Up until the 1990s, most of the opium used to be brought in and then refined in the shanty towns around Istanbul. And then they would, for example, most of it was being trucked, a lot of it still is being trucked into Europe. Most of the heroin coming through Turkey starts off somewhere like Afghanistan.
Afghanistan produces most of the world's opium. Under the Taliban's strict regime, the cultivation of opium was outlawed. But in 2001, after the 9/11 attacks and subsequent US invasion, everything changed. The country was left in disarray allowing poppy production to soar. Over 800,000 kilos of heroin were produced in Afghanistan in 2007. That's a street value of over 20 billion euros. In simple terms, that's 90% of the world's heroin supply.
It's smuggled across Iran and then through eastern Turkey to Istanbul, and from Istanbul into Europe.
The role of Istanbul as a transit point for drugs from east to west, is that something you've investigated and reported on before?
Well, for reasons of self-preservation, the issues of heroin smuggling doesn't tend to get a lot of coverage in the Turkish media. To be honest, it's quite a dangerous thing to try to investigate with anybody who's living here. So I've looked at it, but you have to be very careful. Organised crime, particularly in Istanbul, is very, very powerful. And a journalist is not going to have any protection if he goes after the drug barons.
When it comes to drugs, organised crime has a stranglehold on the city, and a pervasive climate of fear stops journalists digging too deeply. What is clear is that there are huge amounts of heroin flowing through Istanbul. And out of the estimated 4 million drug users in Turkey, it's thought that 1 million live in this city.
Going away to meet an unnamed contact who's asked not to be identified, but he's going to give us a real insight into the drug trade in this city and in this country. That's what we've been promised. We just have to wait and hear what he's got to say.
Donal's travelling to back streets only a stone's throw away from the bright lights of Taksim Square, but it feels like a million miles from Clubland. He's come here to meet a former addict who's not willing to reveal his identity because of his contacts within the underworld.
How tough are the streets of Istanbul?
Ya hayır, yani sürekli uyuşturucuyla ilgili, ne bileyim işte kız kardeşinin kötü yola düşmesiyle ilgili, ne bileyim hırsızlıkla ilgili. Tabii ki bir olaylar, bazı olaylar oluyor. Onu vuruyor, o onu bıçaklıyor, o onu yaralıyor. Nedir, o onun uyuşturucusunu salmış, o onun parasını çalmış, ne bileyim.
Like most cities, residents of Istanbul are affected by the problems of addiction. Alongside these, Istanbul faces the problems caused by the local mafia, who have a profound effect on the city's communities.
How ruthless are the drug dealers in this city and in Turkey?
Zorunludur. Kendi kardeşini öldürebilecek kadar. Sokaklar hep bu işleri yapan insanlara dolu. Bu insanların karnı doyuyor.
Although some members of Istanbul's poorest communities turn to dealing to survive, the mafia bosses hold the real power.
Who's made their fortunes out of drugs in this city?
Kim çıkar gördü? Kaçakçılar çıkar gördü. Bence en büyük olay silah tüccarları gördü bundan faydayı. Çünkü uyuşturucunun parası bir yerlere gidiyor. Nereye gidiyor? Buyurun aşağıda Afganistan, öbür tarafta Pakistan. Oradan buraya geliyor. Buradan kalkıyor Avrupa'ya gidiyor. Bunların her bir yerden geçişlerine bir paralar ödeniyor. Bu paralar nereye gidiyor? Türkiye'deki olan insanlar çok zengin oluyor, aşırı zengin oluyor.
Is there one big families, crime families, that kind of run this city and that kind of manage the illegal exports in the ports and other illegal activities, including the supply of drugs and weapons into the city?
Var tabii. Yani bunu Türkiye geneli biliyor. Benim isim vermeme gerek yok. Bunu Türkiye biliyor, bunu dünya biliyor. Türkiye'deki uyuşturucu trafiğini, büyük trafiğini yönetenler doğulu insanlar.
The big family, the big Turkish family we hear in London is the Basans.
Demek istemediğim o söyledi. Az evvel söylemek istemediğim isim oydu. Benim hayatım hiç sorun değil. Bir tane oğlum var. Hayatını garanti altına alsınlar.
The one name, which is unmentioned name, which came out of a family who are perhaps the biggest drug family in this city and in this country, and therefore one of the biggest drug families in the world, the whole world of drug dealing and drug export. And the name is by Basan.
The Basans are feared in Istanbul, so much so that even a former drug addict won't speak their name. The Babasans come from Lis, a small town in southeastern Turkey, an area notorious for its connection to drug trafficking.
When you talk about the Babasans, I mean, a lot of people will quake in fear and refuse to say anything about them. I mean, you have a situation where you've got this huge clan that, despite two of its main members being in prison, still carries a huge amount of weight, still generates a huge amount of fear. That was always part of their strategy. And they've always used fear as a way of actually getting what they want and ensuring the loyalty of the people closest around them.
The Babasans' drug network has been dubbed the Turkish Connection. Members of the family in Europe and others in Istanbul work together to transport the heroin from eastern Turkey to the rest of the world. This structure has allowed the heroin shipments to be transported on a much larger scale, as every step of the way is overseen by trusted members of the gang. The Babasans control the trafficking trade by maintaining a regime of fear, ensuring complete loyalty and total silence. Even foreign journalists in Istanbul are not willing to talk. But with part of the Turkish connection based in the UK, Donal's going to talk to his contacts back in London. Coming up, Donal meets one of the world's most prolific heroin traffickers.
We was bringing in so much heroin, we actually brought the price of heroin down.
And explores the link between drug money and terrorism when he speaks to the victim of a terrorist attack.
Husband, when did you find out your husband had been killed?
I just felt I knew instantly. To me, there wasn't a shred of doubt.
We're with Donal MacIntyre in Istanbul, an enchanting and exciting city, but also a major player in global heroin distribution, and by association, a constant target for terrorist groups. Donal has hit a wall of silence, so he's flying to the UK for 24 hours to find someone who can tell him about the drug trade in Istanbul, the things that no one dares to reveal in the city itself.
Now, everybody in Istanbul were keen to tell me about the infamous Turkish Connection, a criminal and smuggling network that has become one of the largest traffickers of heroin across the globe. Now, one of the founders of that network is Süleyman Ergin. Now, he's now based in London, and he's agreed to tell me all about it. Now, for his protection and for our welfare, we've agreed to meet him in a very public place.
Known throughout the criminal underworld as the North London Turk, Süleyman and his gang imported large shipments of heroin from Istanbul to the rest of Europe. The gang operated from the late 80s until their eventual arrest in the early 90s. The gang were sentenced to a total of 110 years in jail. Süleyman received 14 years for his involvement.
When I got arrested, my chest was full of red dots. There were snipers on top of the Enfield Town Library.
And were they right to mark you as a very dangerous man at the time?
Because they knew I always carried a gun. They knew I always carried a gun. They knew.
Have you used that gun in anger?
Yeah. Someone tried to rob me, they used it. I'm not going to say where and when or whatever, but I took his bollock off. Yeah, with the Beretta.
In their time, Süleyman and his gang smuggled thousands of kilos of heroin from Istanbul into Europe. With so much at stake, they were prepared to go to any lengths to distribute the drug.
So you were a notorious figure.
Yeah.
And you're regarded as one of the architects of the huge heroin connection, Turkish connection.
Yeah, well, I was in charge of the whole of the distribution of heroin and the collection of the proceeds in England, from Afghanistan to London, to Liverpool, to Manchester, to Scotland.
Via Istanbul?
Yeah, via Istanbul.
Did you escort it across Europe, across town, across London?
Yeah, I had a couple of cars with armed men in there.
And if you'd been stopped? Or?
It was going to be a mad shootout. Bazookas, Kalashnikovs, the lot. No questions asked, because they were getting paid to do what they were supposed to do. If a blue light would have flashed behind us, that was it. They were getting shot.
The Turkish connection was such a big operation, and with so much money behind it, that Suleiman claims they were able to bribe officials at will.
And did you have policemen in your pay?
Yeah, in Italy, yeah.
Customs officers?
And over here, yeah. In the airports.
And how was you paying off the customs officers? Just
they were already paying off, cash. We was even taken into the back of Heathrow Airport to pick the goods up.
So it wouldn't go to customs, wouldn't even go to luggage carousel? No. They'd be taken off?
It was put aside for someone to collect.
The level of corruption Suleiman claims is alarming. Suleiman and the Turkish connection were able to smuggle shipments of heroin into countries like Britain on such a large scale that they eventually affected the street price of the drug.
We was bringing in so much heroin that, we just wanted to offload it. We was dealing 250, 300 kilos every couple of months. We actually brought the price of heroin down.
So you guys were making millions and millions of pounds?
Yeah, we used to walk into my house and empty 2 bin bags, black bin bags of money onto the living room floor, I don't know, £500,000. I just used to get sick of the sight of it. And I used to get someone else to count it for me because I just got sick of the sight of money. I'm sick of it.
In the drug business, it's possible to make a lot of money very quickly, but it's just as easy to lose it all. After his arrest, and with the prospect of 14 years behind bars, Suleiman turned to the very drugs he was supplying. And with Suleiman out of the way, a huge gap in the market opened up for the Babasans to move in.
And the Babasans, for example, big Turkish family, big connections, things like this,
I know them, yeah.
And they were heavily involved in the trade here.
It was us that started Basan off with 11 kilos.
You created the Basan Empire?
Yeah. Basan came to us and said, I've got 11 kilos, can you sort that out for me? We took it from Turkey to Italy. With that 11 kilos, Basan built his empire.
Are they to be feared?
They are feared, yeah. I don't fear them, yeah. I don't fear them. But I know Basan.
And
he's very crude, he's very cunning fella. Sly, couldn't be trusted.
The Babasan Empire now has connections with some far darker organisations in Turkey.
Well, they're involved in the PKK. Guns and PKK. Now the PKK have got control of heroin as well. Basan he couldn't go to Turkey for 4 years because he was in hiding in Iran and Iraq because he was supplying guns to the PKK.
Armed with this new information, Donal's back in Istanbul and heading out to the suburbs to meet his contact. This time, he hopes to find out more about the link between heroin and the PKK. The PKK, or the Kurdistan Workers' Party, are one of Turkey's most feared terrorist groups. When the modern Turkish Republic was established, little attention was paid to the old Ottoman Empire's ethnic provincial borders. The ancient region of Kurdistan was wiped off the map. The anger this caused in the Kurdish people led to the formation of the PKK, a Kurdish nationalist movement dedicated to the establishment of a Kurdish state. In the late 70s, they launched a terror campaign against the Turkish government, which has taken countless lives. The PKK want to reclaim their homeland. Istanbul and its financial centre has become a popular target for their bombing campaigns. Based on what Suleiman revealed in London, Donal's beginning to wonder whether these attacks are being directly funded by the heroin trade moving through the city.
Eskiden bu işin merkezi yani her yere Kolombiya üstünden dağıtılır diye biliyordu herkes. Yani bizim de duyduğumuz tabii bu ama başka kaçakçılık olan işleri biliyorum ben. Özellikle Türkiye'de bir PKK terörü var. Bu PKK terörünün beslendiği yerinde en büyük başında uyuşturucu geliyor. Bu uyuşturucu paralarından örgüte büyük gelirler sağlandı. Bir gerçek yani. Bunu sokaktaki insan da biliyor, ben de biliyorum. Herhalde devletin başındaki insanlar da biliyor.
Funded by drug money, the human cost of the PKK terror campaign is now in the thousands.
Sonra dağdaki terör bitmez. 30 bin kişi ölmüş bugüne kadar. 30 bin kişi ölür, 30 bin kişi daha çıkar daha kandırılarak. O 30 bin kişi de ölür, yeni bir 30 bin kişi çıkar.
The heroin flowing through Istanbul is ultimately to blame for these deaths. But with the drugs starting their journey in Afghanistan, there must be other terrorists cashing in. Nihad Altinez, a local journalist, understands the problem.
Uyuşturucu şöyle söyleyeyim yani bir kere Güneydoğu'dan özellikle Afganistan'dan, Irak'tan, İran'dan çıkan uyuşturucunun terörizme yarar sağlamaması mümkün değil. Mesela bugün baktığın zaman El-Kaide, PKK, yanı sıra Orta Doğu'da işte çeşitli eylemlerin içerisinde olan örgütlerin tamamının kontrolünde zaten uyuşturucu veya insan kaçakçılığı, sadece uyuşturucu olarak bakmamak gerekiyor.
Last year, the UN stated that at least $500 million from the Afghan heroin trade was going directly to the Taliban and associated terrorist groups such as Al-Qaeda. These extremist groups are using it to bankroll terror campaigns against the West. Istanbul is a city with one foot in two continents and two cultures. Firmly rooted in the East, it welcomes business from the West. Tolerance of Western ideas has meant some Islamic extremists view Istanbul as a legitimate target.
International terrorism looms large over the city as it does over pretty much every major tourist destination. But there are additional dangers inherent in living here.
In recent years, Al-Qaeda attacks on Western embassies in Istanbul have become an unwelcome reality. In July 2008, the US consulate was attacked, killing 3 policemen. And before that, Istanbul was struck by the biggest terrorist attack in its history. On November 20th, 2003, 2 suicide truck bombs hit the HSBC headquarters and the British consulate in a simultaneous attack.
English, no problem, I can't see.
27 were killed and 400 wounded. Many of the dead were local Turks and not Westerners as planned. Al-Qaeda claimed responsibility, and since then, several people have been convicted for their involvement. Donal wants to hear about the human cost of this terrorist attack. He's going to talk to Victoria Short, the widow of the British Consul General Roger Short, killed by the bomb in 2003. Still a resident of Istanbul, this is the first television interview she has given since the day her husband was killed.
I was at the consulate working in the garden, as I tended to do. At about 11 o'clock in the morning, we usually have coffee. So I said to the gardener, I'll go out and buy the milk. And I was about midway around the consulate, and there was the explosion. I remember seeing things flying up in the air, and everybody ran.
2 trucks loaded with explosives had driven into the consul compound and detonated.
Everything was completely gone. It was the most really extraordinary, it was a bit like a desert beach. Everything was brown and nothing was there. It was all gone, completely. You can't really, if you haven't seen it, you can't believe it. Just gone. And no colour, everything brown. That's what I remember most.
With all this devastation around her, Victoria immediately knew the fate of her husband.
And when did you find out your husband had been killed?
Well, I just felt I knew instantly. There was just nothing there. You couldn't believe that anybody could, or anything could have survived.
Having heard firsthand the devastating impact of terrorism, Donal is determined to find out what the authorities are doing to combat it. Coming up, Donal meets the head of the Turkish Narcotics Bureau.
Geçen sene itibariyle 800-850 ton civarı olabileceğinden bahsedildi.
Donal MacIntyre's in Istanbul, a city trapped between the Afghan heroin trade and international terrorist networks funded by the drugs. Hundreds of millions of euros worth of the drugs are smuggled from the east, passing through this city and onto the streets of Western Europe. Donal has got up close and personal with the mafia organisations running the heroin business in Istanbul. He's heard from the people affected by the trade, from the drug addicts who use it, to the victims of terrorist attacks on the city. But what is being done to halt this industry? And what hope does the city have for the future? Turkey's narcotics unit is considered one of the best in the world. They train drug enforcement police from around the globe. Oguz Adin runs the department. He's proud of their successful seizures, but knows that these are just a drop in the ocean.
Geçen sene itibariyle 800-850 ton civarı olabileceğinden bahsedildi. Bu aslında çok ciddi bir yakalama olarak gözükmekle birlikte, bir başarı olarak addedilmekle birlikte biz bunun yeterli olduğuna inanmıyoruz. Biz üretimin hemen hemen %10'u kadarını yakalamış görünüyoruz.
With only 10% of heroin being seized, the war against drugs and organised crime is far from over. And although the Turkish authorities have a huge role to play, it's not a battle they can win on their own.
Uyuşturucu konusu tabii sadece ülkemizi ilgilenen bir problem, sorun değil. Bizim yürüttüğümüz çalışmalarda ve İngiliz meslektaşların ifadelerinde İngiltere içerisinde yapılan uyuşturucunun dağıtımında Türk organizasyonlarının etkin olduğu ifade ediliyor. Zaten biz de bu anlamda, bu kapsamda çalışmalar yürütüyoruz. Asıl amacımız olan insanların zehirlenmesine.
To stop people being poisoned by the drugs worldwide requires an international understanding of Turkey's unique problem and help to deal with it.
In Turkey, there are major problems for the Turkish authorities in dealing with drug traffickers. When they've got lorry loads of this stuff coming through, they protect it. They protect it with a lot of firepower. They've lost a lot of their brave officers and soldiers from being able to stop this stuff coming through. So for people in parts of the world, it can produce a very, very significant security threat.
Despite the hard work of international law enforcement, there are still large shipments of heroin being exported. With huge amounts of cash and a no-holds-barred mentality, it's still the drug lords who are calling the shots.
The problem with the drug business, as far as law enforcement is concerned, is that the drug traffickers have far fewer rules to follow than the law enforcement authorities do, and they have far more money to spend. All that customs and the police can ever do is play a game of catch-up. You know, they're always constantly one step behind. Every time they find out something new or find a new way to block the gangs will move on and try something else. The way organised crime is run these days, it's much more like a multinational corporation. Although you might have a particular figurehead who's in charge at one time, if that person goes, there's a rolling hierarchy of other people who can actually take over and run the game just as effectively. So although Hussein and Abdullah Basan are now behind bars, it does seem that the elements of the clan still exist. Certainly the flow of heroin coming out of Afghanistan and through Turkey hasn't slowed down.
We came to Istanbul with Donal MacIntyre to investigate the heroin trade from Turkey into mainland Europe. But what we've discovered is the deadly link between the drugs trade and the war being fought in Afghanistan.
The real problem there is that it's the drug lords, the warlords, who control the poppy production, control the production of heroin, and then make a lot of money out of poor farmers, and they corrupt and ruin the country. What we have there is a very complex international problem. This is going to be a long-term fix to put a country together.
It's clear that this problem goes beyond poppy production. The heroin trade is entangled in a war in Afghanistan, a nationalist struggle in Kurdistan, as well as a fundamental clash between the societies of East and West. The relationship between drugs and terrorism is a terrifying modern-day reality, and so far there is no solution in sight. Istanbul has heroin coursing through its veins, and as long as the West's appetite for drugs continues to soar, then this mystical city will suffer the consequences.